The night did not welcome her. It chased her. Cold rain slashed through the forest like claws, soaking her hair, her skin, her fear. Fog rolled thick between the trees, heavy and choking, wrapping around her legs as if the land itself wanted to drag her down and keep her there. Every breath burned. Every step sent a sharp pain through her bare feet, already torn and bleeding from rocks, thorns, and frozen earth. She was running, not away from something, but for something, her life, and the life growing inside her. Her chest heaved as she stumbled through the undergrowth, branches snapping back to strike her face, her arms, her belly. She wrapped one trembling hand over her stomach as another contraction of fear twisted through her core. The child felt it. She knew the baby felt it. The tiny flutter beneath her palm wasn't movement, it was panic. "I'm sorry," she whispered hoarsely, voice cracking as rain filled her mouth. "I'm so sorry." Her words vanished into the storm. The forest answered with a howl. Not the howl of wolves she recognized. Not the familiar call of a pack under the moon. This sound was wrong. Broken. Twisted. It crawled across her spine and settled there, cold and knowing. They were close. Too close. Her legs screamed for mercy, muscles shaking, lungs tearing with every breath she forced in. She tasted blood. She wasn't sure if it was from a bitten lip or something worse. The ground dipped sharply, and she nearly fell, catching herself against a tree slick with rain and moss. The bark scraped her palms raw. She pressed her forehead against the trunk for half a heartbeat, just half, and that was all it took for fear to slam into her again, harder than before. "Move." She pushed off and ran. The shadows followed. They didn't behave like normal darkness. They stretched where they shouldn't, slid between trees against the wind, gathered low to the ground like living things. She felt them watching her, smelling her fear, sensing the power coiled inside her like a wounded animal. She had tried not to use it. She always tried. But desperation has a way of tearing down promises. As another howl ripped through the fog, closer now, she gasped and let instinct take over. The shadows beneath her feet surged upward, twisting, thickening. Roots snapped as darkness flooded the forest floor, swallowing sound, swallowing light. The world went muffled, like it was holding its breath. For a moment, just a moment, the pursuit faltered. Then pain exploded through her spine. She cried out, collapsing to one knee as white-hot agony tore through her back and down her legs. Her vision blurred. She clutched her belly, rocking forward, biting back a scream as tears mixed with rain on her cheeks. "No, no, no," she whispered. "Not now. Please." The shadow magic recoiled, snapping back into the ground like it had burned her instead. The forest noises rushed back in, too loud, too sharp. Branches cracked behind her. She forced herself upright. Her power was there. Always there. A dark, living thing inside her blood. But it was wild. Untrained. And now, with the pregnancy, it reacted faster than she could think. Every use hurt more than the last, like her body was warning her that it couldn't keep paying the price. She ran again, limping now, each step sending pain through her hips, her back, her belly. She wasn't supposed to be here. That thought cut deeper than the cold. She had known better. Had known the forest beyond the borders was claimed, watched, forbidden. She had known what happened to lone wolves, to rejected omegas, to cursed bloodlines. But she had been out of options, cast out, hunted, carrying a child the world had already decided did not deserve to be born. The fog thickened, closing in until she could barely see her hands in front of her face. Her heart pounded, so hard it felt like it might break her ribs. The wind howled through the trees, cruel and relentless, like laughter. It sounded like rejection, like the voices that had turned on her, like the pack that had once been home. Her mind betrayed her then, dragging her back to the moment it all shattered. The circle of wolves. The way they had stepped back from her, as if she were diseased. The alpha's voice, cold and final, pronouncing judgment. The word unfit. The word dangerous. The way her mate had looked at her belly, and then looked away. Her foot caught on a root, and she went down hard. The breath slammed out of her lungs as she hit the ground, mud and leaves pressing into her skin. Pain flared through her abdomen, sharp and terrifying. She curled instinctively around her stomach, gasping, panic clawing up her throat. "No," she whispered frantically. "Please. Please be okay." She lay there for a second too long. The shadows shifted. She felt them before she saw them. Figures moving through the fog, silent and wrong, their presence bending the air. Predators. Not wolves. Not fully. Hunters. She scrambled backward, palms slipping in mud, heart screaming in her ears. Her power stirred again, restless, desperate. Darkness crept along her fingers, curling like smoke. She didn't want to unleash it. But fear doesn't ask permission. The ground beneath her erupted in shadow, a wave of blackness surging outward, knocking leaves and branches into the air. The fog twisted, screaming as if alive. For a heartbeat, the forest was nothing but darkness and soundless fury. Then the pain hit. She screamed. It ripped out of her, raw and broken, as her body convulsed. The shadows recoiled violently, slamming back into the earth. She collapsed forward, shaking, gasping, tears pouring down her face. She couldn't do this. She couldn't keep running. Her strength was gone, stripped away piece by fear, cold, and guilt. Guilt for bringing a child into this world. Guilt for not being strong enough. Guilt for still being alive when so many wanted her gone. The fog thinned suddenly. She blinked, lifting her head, confused. The trees fell back into a wide clearing, moonlight spilling through a break in the clouds like pale fire. The rain softened to a whisper. The air changed, charged, heavy, watchful. She pushed herself to her feet, swaying. And that was when she saw him. He stood at the far edge of the clearing, tall and still, as if he had always been there. The moon caught the sharp line of his jaw, the broad set of his shoulders, the darkness in his eyes. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't advance. He just watched her. Her heart slammed violently against her ribs. Every instinct she had screamed danger. But there was something else too. Something deeper. A pull she didn't understand and didn't want to feel. The shadows around her stirred, not in fear this time, but recognition. Her breath hitched. She took a step back. He didn't follow. Rain slid down his coat, catching the light like silver. His presence pressed against her senses, heavy and undeniable, like the forest itself had chosen him as its voice. She realized, distantly, that the howls had stopped. The hunters were gone. Or hiding. Her legs gave out. She sank to her knees at the center of the clearing, exhaustion crashing over her in a wave so strong it stole her breath. Her head spun. The world tilted. Still, he didn't move. The silence stretched, thick and electric. She wrapped both arms around her belly, bowing her head, breathing shallow and fast. She didn't look at him again. She couldn't. Looking felt too dangerous. Like seeing him clearly would change something she wasn't ready to lose. She waited for him to speak. He didn't. The wind brushed past her, carrying the scent of rain, pine, and something else, something ancient and powerful. Her heart twisted painfully, and for reasons she couldn't name, tears slid down her cheeks again, silent this time. She was so tired. So very tired of running. If you love dark, emotional werewolf romances filled with fate, fire, and forbidden bonds, then stay here. And if your heart already feels pulled into this world, subscribe to Moonbound Werewolf Romance Stories. Because once you step into stories like this, there is no turning back. In the clearing, under the broken moon, the pregnant shadow wolf lifted her trembling head. And the man who had been watching her from the shadows finally took one step forward. The forest held its breath. He took one step forward. That single movement changed the clearing. The air tightened, as if the forest itself had drawn a sharp breath and decided to stay silent. The wind died down. The rain slowed to a thin whisper. Even the shadows, restless moments ago, stilled at his feet like trained animals waiting for command. He was tall. Not just in height but in presence. The kind of presence that did not need aggression to announce itself. He stood straight, shoulders squared, dark coat heavy with rain, moonlight tracing the hard planes of his face. There was no rush in him.
No wasted motion.
He looked like a man who had learned long ago that speed was optional when power was absolute. The pregnant shadow wolf felt it immediately. Her skin prickled. Her breath caught halfway to her lungs. Every instinct she had sharpened over years of rejection and survival screamed at once. Run, hide, fight, submit. Conflicting urges tangled inside her chest until she could barely tell which one was hers. She tried to stand. Her legs betrayed her. She swayed, one hand braced against the slick earth, the other still wrapped protectively over her belly. Her power stirred again, a reflex she could no longer fully suppress. Darkness bled along the ground toward him, thin and testing, like a wounded creature snapping out of fear.
He stopped.
Not because the shadows reached him, but because she wanted him to. It took her a heartbeat to realize that. The thought unsettled her more than the chase ever had. Don't, she rasped, her voice raw and small in the wide clearing. She didn't know what she was asking him not to do. Come closer, attack, speak. But the word tore free anyway. He studied her like he was memorizing damage. Then he spoke her name. Not loud, not gentle, just certain. The sound of it struck her harder than any blow. Her head snapped up. Her eyes burned as she stared at him, shock slicing through her exhaustion. No one had spoken her name like that in a long time. Not since before the rejection. Before the exile. Before it became something whispered with disgust or fear. She swallowed. How do you know me? He didn't answer right away. He took another step closer, slow and deliberate, boots sinking slightly into the wet earth. The shadows recoiled instinctively, pulling back toward her feet. Not in fear of him, but in recognition. That scared her. I've known who you are longer than you think, he said. His voice was low, roughened by something that had nothing to do with the cold. There was weight in it. History. Regret. She shook her head weakly. You shouldn't. Her power surged again, reacting to the tension in her chest. She forced it down with gritted teeth, pain flaring hot along her spine. She hissed, curling slightly inward, breath coming fast and uneven. He noticed.
His jaw tightened.
Something dark flickered across his eyes. You're hurt, he said. It wasn't concern. It was observation. She laughed once, sharp and broken. That's what happens when you run too long. Or when you're hunted, he replied. Her heart slammed painfully. She pushed herself upright despite the shaking in her limbs, forcing distance between them even as her instinct screamed that distance was the wrong choice. The clearing felt smaller now, like invisible walls had risen around them. You should leave, she said. They'll come back. I know. The way he said it told her he wasn't worried. That made her afraid. She lifted her hand, shadows curling defensively around her fingers, dark tendrils twisting in the moonlight. It hurt. It always hurt. But fear hurt worse. Don't come any closer, she warned, though her voice wavered. He stopped again. Slowly, deliberately. He lifted both hands, palms open at his sides. The gesture was calm, controlled. But there was nothing submissive about it. I'm not here to hurt you, he said. She scoffed weakly. That's what they all say. His mouth tightened.
No.
They usually lie better. Something about that honesty disarmed her more than reassurance ever could. Before she could respond, the forest shifted. A low growl rolled through the trees, vibrating through the ground beneath her knees. Her head snapped toward the sound, terror flaring fresh and sharp. The fog thickened again at the edges of the clearing, shadows stretching unnaturally long. They were back. No more of them. She felt it then, a sudden cold awareness crawling through her bones. The hunters had not fled. They had circled. Waited. She scrambled backward, heart racing, panic clawing up her throat. Her power reacted violently, shadows surging outward in a wild wave that tore leaves from branches and cracked the ground beneath her. The pain hit instantly. She cried out, collapsing forward as agony ripped through her back and down into her hips. Her breath came in strangled gasps. She clutched her belly, terror eclipsing everything else. "No," she whispered frantically.
Please.
"Please." A shape burst from the fog. Then another. Then 3 more. They were wrong. Tall and thin, joints bending at unnatural angles, eyes burning with a sickly pale light. Their mouths stretched too wide when they smiled, teeth sharp and hungry. Shadow beasts. Twisted things born from corrupted magic and old blood. The first one lunged. She screamed. He moved. The alpha crossed the distance between them in a blur of motion, so fast her eyes struggled to follow. One moment he was standing still. The next, he was between her and the beast, his body a solid wall of muscle and intent. He didn't shift. He didn't need to. His fist connected with the creature's skull with a wet, bone-cracking sound. The beast flew backward, slamming into a tree hard enough to split the trunk. It didn't get up. Another attacked from the side. He caught it by the throat mid-leap and twisted. There was no flourish.
No hesitation.
Just brutal efficiency. He snapped its neck like it weighed nothing, tossing the lifeless body aside, without even looking at it. She stared, frozen. This wasn't heroic violence. This was practiced. More shadows surged forward. He met them head-on. Blood sprayed across the clearing, dark against moonlight. He moved with lethal precision, every strike calculated, every kill swift and merciless. He used the terrain without thought, trees, rocks, even the beasts themselves became weapons. When one tried to flank him, he broke its spine and used the body to block another's claws. He was breathing hard now, rain plastering his hair to his forehead, eyes burning with focus. There was no rage on his face. Only resolve. One beast slipped past him. She felt it before she saw it, a sudden spike of cold, a sharp tug at her power. It lunged toward her, claws outstretched, mouth open wide.
She didn't think.
She screamed and unleashed everything she had. Shadow exploded from her body in a violent surge, swallowing the space between them. The beast vanished into darkness with a shriek that cut off abruptly. The power snapped back just as violently. She collapsed, vision blurring, pain ripping through her spine so hard she thought she might break in two. She curled around her belly, sobbing, breath coming in broken gasps. The last beast fell moments later. Silence crashed down. The alpha stood alone among the bodies, chest heaving, fists dripping with blackened blood. He looked around once, assessing, listening. Then he turned back to her. She flinched instinctively, shadows twitching weakly at her sides. She tried to push herself up and failed, arms shaking violently beneath her. "I told you to leave," she whispered, tears streaking down her face. "You should have left." He crossed the clearing slowly now, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal that might bolt or bite without warning. He stopped a few steps away and crouched, bringing himself closer to her level. Up close she could see it, the exhaustion. The scars etched into his skin, some old, some newer. The darkness beneath his eyes that had nothing to do with shadow magic and everything to do with memory. "You can barely stand," he said quietly. "That's not your problem. It is now." She shook her head weakly. "You don't know what you're getting into." His gaze flicked briefly to her belly. Something softened in his expression. Just for a moment. "I know exactly what you're carrying," he said. Her breath caught painfully. Fear surged through her chest, sharp and immediate. She scrambled backward despite the pain, dragging herself through the mud, shadows flaring weakly in warning. "Stay away from my child," she hissed. He stopped instantly. "I'm not your enemy," he said firmly. "You don't get to decide that." "No," he agreed. "You do." The admission stunned her. The clearing felt too quiet, too intimate. Rain tapped softly against leaves overhead. The moon watched from above, pale and unblinking. Her body shook with exhaustion, with fear, with something else she didn't want to name. Because despite everything, despite the danger, the blood, the power curling uneasily inside her, her body leaned toward him. and the child inside her, the frantic fluttering eased. Her breathing slowed, just slightly. She froze, eyes widening as she felt it. The calm. She hated it. She didn't trust it. But it was real. He noticed the change. She saw it in the way his gaze softened again, in the subtle release of tension in his shoulders. "They feel safer near me," he said quietly. She swallowed hard. "That doesn't mean anything. It means everything." Tears spilled over, hot and unwanted. She turned her face away, ashamed of the weakness flooding her chest. "I can't trust you," she whispered. "Not you. Not anyone." He stayed crouched where he was, giving her space even as his presence wrapped around the clearing like a shield. "I wouldn't ask you to," he said. "Not yet." She laughed bitterly. "Then why help me?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because I know what it's like to be hunted for what you are," he said. "And because if I walk away now, you won't survive the night." Her chest tightened painfully. She closed her eyes, rain soaking into her lashes, exhaustion pulling her under. For the first time since the chase began, since the rejection, since she had realized she was truly alone in the world, she stopped running. And in the silence that followed, with blood on the ground and shadows retreating into the trees, the alpha stayed right where he was, watching over her, waiting. She didn't remember when she fell asleep, only that at some point the shaking stopped. The cold eased first. Not completely, but enough that it no longer felt like it was eating her from the inside out. The rain faded into a distant sound, soft and steady, like breath against leaves. The ground beneath her wasn't frozen mud anymore. It was firm.
Dry.
Protected. When awareness returned, it came slowly, like light filtering through thick clouds. She was moving, not on her own feet. Her body stiffened instantly, panic snapping awake before thought could catch up. Her breath hitched. Her hand twitched, shadows stirring weakly around her fingers. "It's all right," a low voice said close to her ear. "You're safe. I've got you." She hated how quickly her body believed him. She forced her eyes open. The forest blurred past above her, moonlight breaking through the canopy in fractured silver lines. She was cradled against a solid chest, her cheek pressed against fabric warm with body heat. One strong arm supported her back. The other was braced beneath her knees, careful, so careful, not to jostle her belly. She swallowed hard. "Put me down," she murmured, though her voice lacked any real force. He didn't stop walking, but he adjusted his grip, subtly, as if to reassure her without saying it out loud. "You couldn't walk," he said, "and they'll be back by dawn." She knew that was true. That was the worst part. Her head lolled slightly against his shoulder as exhaustion pressed down on her again, heavy and relentless. She should fight it, should stay alert. But every part of her body ached, deep and bone level, and the child inside her was quiet now, resting, trusting. That frightened her more than the shadow beasts ever had. They moved through the forest in silence, the alpha's steps sure and unhurried. He chose paths she hadn't seen, places where the trees grew thicker and the shadows felt older. Not hostile, watchful, as if the land itself recognized him. She stared at his jaw, the faint scar cutting through the stubble there, and felt memories begin to stir. Memories she had spent years burying under survival and shame. Her past didn't come back all at once. It never did. It arrived in fragments. A flash of sunlight on white stone. The smell of incense and damp earth. The sound of voices raised, not in anger at first, but disappointment.
Fear.
She squeezed her eyes shut, but it didn't stop the images from coming. She saw herself standing in the center of the pack clearing, shoulders squared, chin lifted even as her hands shook. She had been younger then, thinner, still hopeful enough to believe that truth would protect her. She remembered the circle of wolves around her. Familiar faces. Elders who had watched her grow. Friends who wouldn't meet her eyes. And, at the center of it all, her mate. He hadn't touched her. Not when the alpha spoke the words of rejection. Not when the crowd murmured. Not when the mark on her skin flared for the first time, black and silver shadows crawling up her arm like living ink. She had looked at him then, searched his face for anything. Anger.
Protest. Love.
He looked away. That memory hurt more than the brand. Her breath shuddered. The alpha carrying her felt it immediately. His steps slowed. Not stopping, but adjusting. "You don't have to tell me," he said quietly. She hadn't realized she'd been shaking. "Yes," she whispered.
Ido.
Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "They called me forward like it was a ceremony," she said. "Like an honor. Everyone was watching. I thought they were finally going to accept me." She swallowed hard. "They said my blood was wrong. That the shadows in me weren't natural. That my power didn't come from the moon, but from something older. Something that shouldn't exist anymore." Her fingers curled weakly into his coat. "They called it shadow flame," she continued. "A bloodline tied to old wars. Old endings. They said every time it appeared, packs burned. Lands fell. So they erased it.
Killed it.
Buried it in history." Her laugh was hollow. "Except they missed one." The alpha said nothing. He didn't need to. She could still see the elder's eyes when they'd spoken the prophecy. Not fear.
Certainty.
"They said I was a mistake that corrected itself too late," she murmured. "That I was dangerous even before I shifted for the first time. They watched me all my life, waiting for the shadows to show. When they did, that was it." Her mind jumped again, this time to pain. The first time her power had truly surfaced. She'd been cornered by a group of younger wolves, taunting her, pushing her, daring her to react. She'd felt something snap inside her chest. Something hot and cold all at once. The shadows had answered. The ground had cracked. She hadn't hurt anyone, but the fear in their eyes had sealed her fate. "I didn't choose this," she whispered fiercely. "I never wanted it." "I know," the alpha said. She opened her eyes at that, not because of the words, because of how sure he sounded. They reached a narrow ravine where the trees grew close and the air felt warmer, shielded from wind and rain. He ducked beneath low branches without slowing, instinct guiding every movement. She watched him from beneath heavy lashes, noticing things she shouldn't have had the energy to notice. The way he never stumbled. The way his grip adjusted when her breathing changed. The way his gaze scanned their surroundings constantly, not with paranoia, but with responsibility. He carried her like this wasn't a burden, like it was a promise. Her chest tightened painfully. "They said my child would be worse," she said suddenly. His body went still for half a step. She felt it. "They said pregnancy would amplify the shadow flame," she continued, voice trembling now. "That it would tear me apart from the inside. Or turn me into something that couldn't tell friend from enemy. They called my baby an abomination before it even took its first breath." Tears slid silently into her hair. "They said killing it would be mercy." Her words broke at the end. The alpha stopped walking. Carefully, he lowered her to the ground, easing her back against a large, moss-covered stone that radiated faint warmth. He knelt in front of her, close enough now that she could see every line of tension in his face. His jaw was clenched so tightly a muscle ticked there. "That's why you ran," he said quietly. She nodded. "I didn't even wait to hear the sentence," she whispered. "I knew what it would be." She expected anger, judgment,
Pity.
She got none of it. Instead, he reached out slowly, deliberately, and rested his hand on the ground beside her knee. Not touching her. Not crossing a line she hadn't given permission to cross. "No one gets to decide that for you," he said. "Or for your child." Her breath hitched. "You don't know what this power can do," she said. "You don't know what I could become." "I know exactly what power costs," he replied. For the first time, something cracked in his voice. She looked at him more closely then. At the scars she'd only glimpsed before. At the way his eyes darkened. Not with fear, but memory. "They made me a king because I survived what should have killed me," he said. "Not because I was pure. Not because I was safe." He looked away briefly, then back. "They don't crown heroes," he continued. They crown weapons. The truth of that settled heavy between them. She studied him in silence, feeling something inside her shift. Not trust. Not yet. But understanding. They stayed there for a long while. Long enough for the forest to breathe again. For the moon to climb higher. For her pulse to slow. Eventually, he rose and led her deeper into the ravine, to a shallow cave hidden behind hanging roots and stone.
Inside, it was dry. Warm.
The air hummed faintly, like a heartbeat in the earth itself. He built a small fire with practiced ease, its light dancing gently against the stone walls. Shadows pooled harmlessly in the corners, calm for the first time in hours. She sat with her back against the wall, legs drawn in carefully, both hands resting over her belly. "This place," she murmured. "It's old." "Yes," he said. "It doesn't judge." She laughed softly at that. "I wish I'd found it sooner." "You weren't meant to be alone when you did," he replied. The words settled into her chest, heavy and warm. As the fire crackled, she spoke more. Not all at once. Not in a rush. Just pieces. Stories of sleeping in abandoned dens. Of hiding her scent. Of learning to feel the shadows before they moved. Of the first time she realized she was pregnant, sitting alone under a dead tree with her hands shaking and tears streaming down her face, not from fear, but from love so sudden and fierce it stole her breath. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't ask her to be brave or strong or grateful. And most importantly, he never once looked at her like she was dangerous. As the fire burned low and exhaustion pulled at her again, she leaned back against the stone, eyes heavy. "I don't know who I am anymore," she admitted quietly. Omega. Shadow. Mother. Monster. He stood and moved closer, crouching again, but this time he reached out. Slowly.
Carefully.
His fingers brushed hers. "You're still you," he said. "Everything else is just what the world decided to call it." Her breath trembled. For the first time in years, the shadows inside her didn't feel like a curse. They felt like they were listening. And as she drifted into a shallow, guarded sleep, with the alpha keeping watch at the mouth of the cave, one truth settled deep into her bones. Whatever she was no longer alone. Dawn came quietly. Not with warmth. Not with comfort. Just a thinning of darkness, a soft gray light creeping into the cave, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. The fire had burned down to embers, glowing faintly, casting long shadows that stretched and shifted along the stone walls. She woke with a sharp breath, heart pounding, one hand flying to her belly. Still there. Still warm. Still alive. Relief hit her so hard her vision blurred. For a moment she didn't move. She listened instead. To the slow drip of water somewhere deeper in the stone. To the faint rustle of leaves outside. To the steady, grounding presence she had felt even in sleep. He was still there. She turned her head. The alpha stood at the mouth of the cave, back to her, tall and unmoving. Dawn light traced the edges of his silhouette, silvering his shoulders, his hair, the scars along his arms. He looked like part of the stone itself, ancient, patient, unyielding. He hadn't slept. The knowledge settled in her chest, heavy and strange. She shifted, wincing as stiffness and soreness rippled through her body. Her power stirred in response, shadows sliding lazily along the ground before settling again. They felt calmer, quieter, as if the night had soothed something deep inside them. Inside her. "You should rest longer," he said without turning. "Your body's still healing." "I'm fine," she replied automatically. The lie tasted familiar. He glanced back at her then. Not sharply. Not accusingly. Just enough to let her know he'd heard it for what it was. "We need to move," she added, pushing herself upright carefully. "They won't stop looking." He nodded. "I know." She frowned. "You don't sound worried." "I'm not," he said. "Not about them." That should have reassured her.
It didn't.
They left the cave shortly after, moving deeper into the forest, farther than she'd ever dared go before. The trees here were older, their trunks thick and twisted, roots breaking the surface of the earth like the backs of sleeping beasts. The air felt different. Heavy.
Charged.
Every step hummed faintly beneath her feet, like the land recognized her presence. She felt it in her bones. The deeper they went, the more the forest changed. Birds fell silent. Wind stilled. Even the light seemed reluctant to follow, filtering down in fractured beams that never quite reached the ground. Her shadows stretched longer with every step. Not restless. Not afraid.
Awake.
She slowed without realizing it, her hand drifting to her chest as a strange pull tugged at her from somewhere ahead. It wasn't pain. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. "Do you feel that?" she asked quietly. He stopped beside her, scanning the trees. "Yes." Her breath caught. "What is it?" "A place people forgot," he said. "On purpose." They emerged into a wide clearing ringed by standing stones.
She froze.
The sight stole the air from her lungs. The stones rose from the earth in a perfect circle, each one carved with symbols, so worn they barely looked like markings anymore. Moss and ivy clung to their surfaces, but beneath the green she could see faint traces of silver and black etched deep into the rock. The ground inside the circle was bare, smooth stone instead of soil, as if nothing had ever been allowed to grow there. At the center stood a low altar, cracked down one side, its surface darkened with age, and something else she didn't want to name. The forest bent away from the clearing. Not in fear, in reverence. Her heart began to race. "No," she whispered, though she didn't know why.
No, no, no.
Her feet carried her forward anyway. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, but the pull was stronger than instinct, stronger than reason. Each step toward the altar sent a ripple through her power, shadows curling tightly around her ankles like they were guiding her home. He didn't follow her immediately. He stayed at the edge of the circle, tension rolling off him in waves. "You don't have to go in," he said. She shook her head faintly. "It won't let me stop." The words surprised her as much as they did him. The moment she crossed the boundary, the air changed. It pressed in around her, thick and electric, raising the hair on her arms. Her skin prickled. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The shadows beneath her feet darkened, sharpening, as if responding to something ancient and familiar. She reached the altar and stopped. Her breath came fast and shallow. The stone was cold. She could feel it without touching it. "You know this place," he said quietly from behind her. She nodded slowly. "I don't want it." Her hand lifted on its own. The instant her fingers brushed the surface of the altar, the world shattered. Light and darkness exploded behind her eyes. She gasped as visions slammed into her, violent and overwhelming. Fire roared through her veins, not burning, but awakening. Shadows surged to meet it, wrapping the flames in cool, living darkness. She cried out, staggering as images flooded her mind. A woman stood before her, tall and unbowed, hair streaming like liquid fire down her back. Her eyes burned silver black, just like the shadows and flame twisting inside her own chest. Power radiated from her in waves that bent the land beneath her feet. A crown of fire rested on the woman's head. Not given.
Claimed.
The vision shifted. A battlefield soaked in blood and ash. Wolves and beasts locked in brutal combat. The sky burned red beneath a massive blood moon. At the center of it all, the same woman stood, one hand raised, shadows and flame tearing through the enemy ranks like a living storm. Then pain. A child's cry pierced the chaos. The vision spun again. A newborn, lifted toward the blood moon, its tiny fists clenched, its howl echoing with power far beyond its eyes. Shadows wrapped protectively around it. Fire danced harmlessly along its skin.
Her child.
Her scream tore out of her as the vision slammed into its final truth. A voice, ancient, layered, neither male nor female, thundered through her mind. The one with the mark. The mother of the end, or the beginning. She ripped her hand away from the altar, collapsing to her knees as the visions tore free, leaving her shaking and gasping. Her heart hammered violently. Her body felt like it was splitting apart from the inside. "No," she sobbed, clutching her belly. I don't want this. I don't want to be this. Tears streamed down her face, hot and unstoppable. I just want my child safe, she whispered brokenly. That's all. I don't want crowns or prophecies or blood. I don't want to end anything. The ground beneath her trembled faintly. The standing stones hummed, their ancient symbols glowing softly for the first time in centuries.
He crossed the boundary then.
The moment he stepped into the circle, the air reacted, resisting him, testing him. He pushed through anyway, jaw clenched, power rolling off him in dark, controlled waves. He dropped to one knee beside her, close enough now that she could feel his warmth through the cold stone. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. Get it out of me, she begged, voice breaking.
Please.
I'll do anything. I'll run. I'll disappear. Just don't let them turn my baby into a weapon. He reached for her, and stopped, his hand hovering inches from her shoulder. Look at me, he said softly. She shook her head violently. I can't. I won't force you, he said. But hear this. She sobbed, shoulders shaking. This place doesn't lie, he continued. It doesn't make monsters. It reveals them. And what it showed you wasn't destruction. She laughed bitterly. Did you see the fire? The blood. I saw choice, he replied. That stopped her. Slowly, trembling, she lifted her head. His eyes held hers, steady and unafraid. The prophecy doesn't say you will end the world, he said. It says you could. Or you could save it. She shook her head weakly. That's not a choice. That's a curse. Only if someone else decides for you, he said. The stones pulsed again, brighter this time. Her shadows stirred, lifting from the ground in soft, swirling patterns that didn't hurt. Fire flickered beneath her skin, not burning, but warm. Protective.
She felt it then.
Not destiny. Connection. The woman from the vision hadn't looked trapped. She'd looked resolute. Strong.
Free.
The realization terrified her. I'm not her, she whispered. No, he agreed. You're you. Her breath shuddered. And that's why it chose you, he added.
She broke then.
She collapsed forward, forehead pressing against the stone floor, sobs racking her body as the weight of it all crashed down on her. Years of rejection, of fear, of running, of believing she was wrong simply for existing. He moved without hesitation. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her carefully against his chest, one hand splayed protectively over her belly, the other bracing her shaking shoulders. His hold was firm but gentle, grounding her as the world threatened to tear her apart. She didn't fight it. She clutched his arm like it was the only solid thing left. I can't do this, she cried. I'm not strong enough. You already are, he murmured. You just don't see it yet. The forest watched in silence as the ancient shrine awakened around them, symbols glowing softly beneath the rising sun. And deep beneath the stone, something old stirred. Not in hunger, in recognition. The myth had awakened. And whether she wanted it or not, the world had finally remembered her name. The forest did not breathe. It waited. The air inside the stone circle felt suspended, as if time itself had paused to witness her unravel. The glow etched into the ancient symbols pulsed faintly, not bright enough to illuminate, but strong enough to remind her that she was seen by the land, by the past, by something that had been patient for centuries. She remained on her knees, folded inward, arms wrapped tightly around herself, as though she could contain the storm inside her chest. Her sobs were quiet now, strangled by exhaustion, each breath scraping raw against her throat. The Alpha did not loosen his hold. He stayed anchored behind her, solid and unyielding, his presence a barrier between her and the weight of the shrine. His breathing was steady, deliberate, as though he were lending her his rhythm when hers faltered. The shadows around her shifted again. Not violently, not defensively. They rose like mist from the stone, curling upward in slow, deliberate spirals, brushing against the altar, tracing the symbols etched into the standing stones. Where darkness passed, the carvings responded, lines of ancient script igniting softly, one after another, like memories being awakened rather than alarms being raised. She felt it before she understood it. The power was not surging. It was listening. Her breath hitched as a new sensation unfurled beneath her fear, an awareness that extended beyond her own skin. She could feel the age of the stones, the long silence they had endured. She could feel the forest's roots knotted deep below the earth, the way they drank from shadow and moonlight alike. She could feel the echo of those who had stood here before her, wolves who had believed, wolves who had feared, wolves who had tried to bury what they did not understand. Her tears slowed. The shrine did not demand. It revealed. She pressed her palm flat against the cold stone floor, grounding herself, and the moment she did, the visions returned, not with violence, but with clarity. Fire bloomed in her mind again, not raging this time, controlled. It coiled around shadow the way breath coils around a spoken word. Neither consumed the other. They moved together, inseparable, balanced. The woman crowned in flame appeared once more, but now she stood still, gaze steady, expression neither cruel nor kind. Resolute. Her crown was not a symbol of rule. It was a burden accepted. The vision shifted gently. The child beneath the blood moon did not howl in pain. It howled in defiance, small chest rising with impossible strength, shadows wrapping protectively around its form while fire traced sigils in the air above it. The moon overhead pulsed, not as an omen, but as a witness. Her heart clenched painfully. "That's not destruction," she whispered hoarsely, the words torn from her without conscious thought. "No," the Alpha replied quietly. "It's survival." She swallowed hard. The voice of the prophecy returned, not thunderous now, but low, resonant, threaded through the stone and bone alike. The one with the mark is not born to rule. She is born to decide. Her chest heaved as understanding crept in, unwelcome and relentless. This was why the elders had panicked, why her power had been named a curse before she ever had the chance to speak for herself, why her pregnancy had tipped fear into hysteria. She had not been rejected because she was weak. She had been rejected because she was uncontrollable. "No one can command me," she murmured, bitterness bleeding into her voice. That's what terrifies them. The Alpha's grip tightened fractionally, not restraining, anchoring. "They fear what they can't own," he said. "And you were never meant to be owned." Her breath caught. A sharp, painful memory surfaced without warning. The rejection ceremony. The circle of her pack. The way the ground had felt too hard beneath her bare knees. The smell of ash and pine and judgment. Her mate standing across from her, refusing to meet her eyes as he spoke the words that severed the bond before it had fully formed. Unfit. Unstable. Dangerous. She remembered the mark seared into her skin, the way the pain had burned brighter than any flame she had ever summoned. She remembered the silence afterward. Not sympathy, not regret, just relief. Relief that the problem had been cast out. Her shadows rippled now, responding to the memory with a low, dangerous hum. The Alpha felt it.
His jaw tightened.
"You survived all of it," he said. "That wasn't an accident." She shook her head slowly. "I survived because I ran." "And because you protected your child," he countered. "Every step you took was a choice." The word echoed inside her.
Choice.
The shrine pulsed again, brighter this time. The standing stones began to resonate, a low vibration passing through the earth, up through her bones. She gasped softly as warmth spread through her belly, not painful, not alarming, comforting. The child stirred, not in distress, in recognition. Her hand flew to her stomach, fingers trembling as emotion overwhelmed her. Tears welled again, but these were different, less broken, more raw. "It feels aware," she whispered. "Like it knows this place." "It does," the Alpha said. "This shrine was built for bloodlines like yours." Her chest tightened. "Then why does everyone act like we're monsters?" "Because your kind doesn't kneel," he replied. The truth of it settled heavily between them. For generations, packs had survived on hierarchy and obedience. Alpha above all. Strength measured by dominance. power tolerated only when it could be controlled. She had been born wrong in a world that demanded submission, and her child would be born even more so. The thought sent a spike of fear through her chest. "I won't let them take my baby," she said, voice hardening despite the tremor beneath it. "I won't let them use it or kill it." The alpha shifted, moving so he could look at her properly. He gently guided her to turn, never forcing, until she was facing him. His eyes searched hers, dark and unwavering. "They won't," he said. "Not while I breathe." The words were not a promise, made lightly. They were a vow. Something old stirred in his gaze then, recognition answering recognition. The shrine seemed to sense it too. The symbols carved into the stones flared brighter, reacting to the alignment of power between them. Her breath caught as she felt it. Not a mating bond. Not fate. Something rarer.
Alliance.
The ancient voice spoke once more, softer now, almost approving. The mother does not stand alone. The guardian walks beside her. She stiffened. Guardian? The alpha exhaled slowly, eyes never leaving hers. The old myth spoke of one, he said. An alpha who could stand in shadow without being consumed by it. One who could choose protection over domination. Her heart hammered. "You," she whispered. "I never believed it," he admitted. "Not until now." The air thickened as the truth of it settled into place. The shrine did not react to him as it had to others, did not repel, did not challenge. It accepted. She could feel his power then, clearly for the first time. It was immense, yes, but disciplined. Held back by choice, not limitation. It did not seek to overpower hers. It curved around it instinctively, creating space rather than pressure. The realization left her shaken. "I don't want this path," she said quietly. "I don't want war. I don't want to become something everyone fears." "Then don't," he said simply. She frowned. "You make it sound easy." "It won't be," he replied. "But destiny isn't a command. It's a crossroads." Her gaze dropped to her belly again. "What if I fail?" she whispered. "What if I choose wrong?" He reached out this time, slowly, deliberately, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His hand rested over hers, warm and steady. "Then you'll face the consequences," he said honestly. "Like everyone else who chooses. But you won't face them alone." Something inside her broke open at that. Not fear.
Trust.
The shrine began to settle then, the light dimming gradually as the symbols faded back into stone. The air loosened, releasing the pressure it had held since her arrival. The forest exhaled, leaves rustling softly as sound returned to the clearing. The myth had spoken. Now it waited. She rose unsteadily to her feet, the alpha rising with her, never releasing her hand. Her legs trembled, but she remained upright, spine straight despite the weight she carried. "I'm not ready," she said. "You don't have to be," he replied. "Readiness comes later." She looked once more at the altar, at the cracked stone, the ancient stains, the weight of history etched into its surface. "This place will call others," she said quietly. "Won't it?" "Yes. Enemies. And allies." Her shadows stirred, restless now, not afraid but alert. "Then we need to move," she said, resolve threading through her voice. "Before they come looking." He nodded. The world won't stay ignorant forever. As they stepped out of the circle together, the shrine fell silent behind them, ancient and patient once more. But something had changed. The myth was no longer buried. It had a heartbeat. And as the forest closed around them, shadows and flame walking in balance for the first time in generations, the truth echoed quietly through the roots of the world. She was not destiny's weapon. She was its choice. And the beginning or the end would not be decided by prophecy. It would be decided by her. The forest did not give them time. It never did. The first warning came as a tremor beneath her feet, not from the shrine this time, but from something heavier. Something approaching with intent. The birds fell silent all at once, as if the air itself had been cut. Even the wind shifted, dragging the scent of iron and wolf and old dominance through the trees. She felt it in her spine before she heard it. Not fear. Recognition. Her shadows drew closer to her skin, coiling tight like muscles preparing to strike. The alpha's posture changed beside her, shoulders rolling back, presence sharpening. The calm he had carried moments ago vanished, replaced by something colder, older. "They followed us," she said quietly. "Yes," he answered. "They were always going to." The first of them emerged from the fog without ceremony. Then another. Then more. Alphas. She could feel them before she counted them. 5 distinct signatures of power pressing outward, claiming space, testing dominance. Their wolves prowled just beneath the surface of their skin, eyes glowing faintly as they stepped into the clearing around the shrine. The stones answered them, not with welcome, with warning. The carved symbols flickered weakly, as if bracing themselves. The ground vibrated beneath her boots, reacting to the sudden convergence of so much force in one place. A tall alpha with ash-gray hair moved forward first, his gaze locking onto her stomach before rising to her face. His lip curled, not in surprise but confirmation. "So the rumors were true," he said. "The shadow bearer lives." Her jaw tightened. She didn't shrink. The alpha beside her shifted slightly, placing himself half a step forward, not blocking her, but making a statement. The forest seemed to lean toward him, recognizing authority even the others could not deny. "You stand on sacred ground," he said. "State your purpose." The gray-haired alpha snorted. "Don't pretend this place belongs to you." "It doesn't belong to anyone," he replied evenly. "That's the point." Another alpha laughed, sharp, humorless. A woman this time, eyes bright with calculation. "And yet you brought her here. You woke it. You risked all our packs for a cursed omega." The word struck like a slap. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself as anger rose, not wild, not consuming, but focused. Her shadows stirred, rippling outward just enough to remind them she was not prey. "I am not cursed," she said. Her voice carried farther than she expected, threading through the clearing with quiet authority. "I was cast out because I wouldn't kneel." Murmurs rippled through the gathered alphas. The gray-haired one sneered. "You were cast out because your bloodline ends worlds." "That's a lie," she snapped. "And you know it." "Do we?" Another alpha cut in, younger, eyes burning with fear poorly disguised as rage. "Every prophecy speaks of ruin.
Fire.
Shadow. Death. Every prophecy speaks of choice," she shot back. "You just don't like the ones you can't control." The tension thickened, pressing down on her chest like a physical weight. She felt the child stir again, not distressed, but alert. A quiet pulse of strength radiated from her belly, grounding her even as the alpha's combined dominance sought to crush her resolve. The alpha beside her lifted his chin. "This ends now," he said. "You will leave this place." The gray-haired alpha's eyes narrowed. "You don't give orders here." "I do when you threaten someone under my protection." That did it. The air exploded with snarls. Wolves surged forward, claws scraping against stone as several alphas lost control for just a heartbeat, long enough for violence to spill into the clearing. She reacted on instinct, shadows leaping outward, wrapping around tree trunks, dragging roots to the surface, creating barriers of darkness between herself and the attackers. Pain lanced through her spine as she drew too deeply, too fast. She gasped, clutching her stomach, vision blurring at the edges. The alpha was moving even as she staggered. He didn't shift fully.
He didn't need to.
He fought like a storm held barely in check, precise, devastating. Bone cracked beneath his blows. A rival alpha was thrown backward, colliding with a standing stone hard enough to shatter part of it. Another went down snarling, blood splattering the earth. But it wasn't clean. It was ugly. Every strike carried exhaustion. Every movement hinted at battles fought long before this one. He killed one of them, not quickly, not mercifully, because the alpha had lunged for her throat. The body hit the ground with a dull finality. Silence slammed down. Even the fog seemed to recoil. She stared at the fallen alpha, heart pounding painfully. Death sat heavy in the clearing, undeniable and irreversible. The gray-haired alpha stepped back slowly, eyes flicking from the corpse to her to the alpha at her side. His expression hardened, not with grief, but calculation. "This is exactly why she cannot be allowed to live," he said coldly. "Look at what follows her." Rage surged through her, hot and sharp. "I didn't ask you to come," she snarled. "I didn't ask for your fear." "You exist," he replied. "That's enough." The woman alpha took a step forward. "This ritual cannot continue," she said. "She must leave.
Now."
Her heart slammed against her ribs. She turned toward the alpha beside her, searching his face. This was the moment. She felt it with brutal clarity. The crossroads the shrine had spoken of. The choice that could not be avoided. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to protect her child, to refuse to be judged again. But a smaller, more fragile hope lingered. She waited. The alpha's jaw clenched. His gaze moved across the gathered alphas, his people. Wolves who had followed him into war. Wolves who trusted him to protect the balance, even when it meant sacrifice. Then his eyes returned to hers. For a heartbeat, he hesitated. Just one. But it was enough. The gray-haired alpha smiled slowly, triumph bleeding through his restraint. "Choose," he said softly. "Your pack or her." The silence stretched. Her chest tightened, something aching deeply where hope had begun to take root. She didn't wait for the answer. She stepped back. "I won't be the reason you tear yourselves apart," she said quietly. Her voice trembled, but she didn't falter. "And I won't beg for permission to exist." The alpha's eyes widened slightly. "Wait." She shook her head. "I've done enough waiting." The shadows obeyed her without hesitation, parting to clear a path through the trees. She turned away from the shrine, from the alphas, from the man who had stood beside her when the world felt unbearable. Every step away felt like tearing something loose inside her chest. But she kept walking. The fog swallowed her quickly, damp and cold against her skin. Behind her, voices rose again. Arguments, orders, anger. But she didn't slow. She didn't look back. Not when pain flared through her back. Not when tears blurred her vision. Not when her heart screamed at her to turn around.
She ran.
Not in panic. In resolve. The forest closed around her, branches whipping at her arms, roots threatening to trip her. Her breath burned, but she pushed through it. One hand braced protectively over her belly. "I won't beg again," she whispered fiercely to the child inside her. "Never." The shadows followed, no longer wild, no longer defensive. They moved with purpose. Behind her, far back in the clearing she had left behind, the alpha stood motionless, fists clenched at his sides as the consequences of his hesitation settled heavily on his shoulders. The world had chosen conflict. And so had she. This was no longer a story about survival alone. It was about defiance. And somewhere in the dark, forces far older than any pack began to stir, because once the world pushes back hard enough, something always pushes back harder. The forest did not hide her for long. It never did when he was looking. She collapsed near dawn, knees giving out beneath her as the fog thinned into pale strands of light. Her breath came shallow, each inhale scraping against raw lungs. Blood soaked the hem of her torn dress, where thorns had bitten too deep. Her shadows, exhausted from carrying her so far, loosened their grip and melted back into the earth. She didn't hear him approach. She felt him. The ground shifted, subtle but sure. The air grew heavier, warmer, as if the night itself recognized him and stepped aside. When she lifted her head, vision swimming, he was already there, kneeling, close enough that she could see the strain carved into his face. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "I know," he said. His voice was low, roughened by regret. He didn't reach for her right away. He studied her first, the way she guarded her belly even in exhaustion, the tremor in her hands she tried to hide, the blood drying along her calf. Then he moved. Careful. Deliberate. He tore fabric from his sleeve and wrapped it around her leg, fingers steady despite the tension rolling off him. He didn't ask permission. He didn't apologize. He worked as if this was the only place he had ever been meant to be. She flinched when his touch brushed too close to her spine. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly, not looking up. "I know," she replied. The truth of it surprised her. They sat in silence while he cleaned and bound her wounds, the forest waking slowly around them. Dew clung to leaves. A distant bird tested its voice. The world felt smaller here, contained by the curve of his shoulders and the steady rhythm of his breathing. When he finished, he leaned back on his heels. "You ran," he said. "You hesitated," she answered. The words landed between them without anger. "Just wait." He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, something raw stared back at her. Not dominance. Not command.
Fear.
"I didn't choose them," he said. "I failed to choose you fast enough." She swallowed. Her chest ached, sharp and deep. "That pause," she said softly, "was everything." "I know." He shifted closer, enough that she could feel his warmth seeping into her chilled skin. "You don't understand what that choice costs." "Then tell me," she said. "Or leave." The wind stirred. The shadows leaned in. He took a long breath. "I am bound," he began. "Not to a pack. To a vow older than any crown." His gaze dropped to the ground. "A curse, if you want the truth." Her heart stuttered. "I recognized you," he continued. "The first moment I felt your presence. The shrine confirmed it, but I already knew." He looked up then, eyes fierce. "I have been taught to watch for you my entire life." Her breath caught. "They told me if I ever found you, I must keep my distance," he said. "Because if I bond with you, if I choose you fully, I lose control of what I become." She laughed once, hollow. "So, you're afraid of yourself?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "And of what I would do to protect you." The child stirred, a gentle pressure against her palm. She pressed her hand to her belly, grounding herself. "They were wrong about me," she said. "About my blood. About my power." "I know. They try to kill my child." His jaw tightened, something dangerous flashing across his face. "I know." Silence wrapped around them again, thick but not uncomfortable. It felt like standing at the edge of something vast, waiting to see who would step first. "You can still walk away," she said. "You should." He didn't move. "I won't," he replied. "But I won't cage you either. Trust me or leave." Her heart hammered painfully. She searched his face for deception, for fear sharp enough to break this fragile moment. She found only resolve. Slowly, she leaned forward until their breaths mingled, close enough that the air between them felt charged. Heat curled low in her chest, not hunger, not desire, but connection. Recognition. He froze, giving her space even as his eyes darkened. For a moment, it felt like the world held its breath. Then fear surged, old, familiar, brutal. She pulled back. "I can't," she whispered. "Not yet." He nodded, acceptance immediate. "Then we wait." He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as they moved toward a shallow cave nestled between ancient roots. Inside, he built a small fire, its glow soft and steady. He settled beside her, not touching unless she leaned into him first.
She did.
Just a little. His arm came around her shoulders, protective without possession. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the slow, powerful beat of his heart. For the first time since exile, she slept. And he stayed awake, watching the shadows move, not as enemies, but as witnesses to something fragile and dangerous taking shape in the quiet dark. Morning came wrong. Not gentle. Not quiet. It came with boots on stone and voices sharpened by certainty. She woke to the sound of iron striking rock, once, twice, measured and deliberate. The fire in the cave had burned low, embers breathing faint red light into the gray dawn. For a moment, she didn't move. She listened. She felt the child stir, alert in a way that made her stomach tighten. He was already awake. She sensed it in the tension of his body, in the way his breath had slowed into something controlled and dangerous. When she opened her eyes, he was standing at the mouth of the cave, shoulders squared, gaze fixed outward.
They found us, she said.
Yes, he replied. And they brought witnesses. The words tasted bitter. She pushed herself upright, pain flaring through her leg, then settling into a dull ache. He turned as she stood, eyes flicking to her belly, then back to her face. A question passed between them, without sound. She nodded. I won't hide, she said. He didn't argue. They stepped out together. The clearing beyond the cave had been claimed overnight. Stones had been dragged into a circle. Banners marked with pack sigils hung from branches like declarations. Torches burned though the sun had risen, their flames snapping in the cool air. The council waited. 7 alphas. 3 elders. Wolves lining the perimeter, rigid and watchful. The gray-haired alpha from the shrine stood front and center, hands clasped behind his back. His mouth curved in something like satisfaction when he saw her. You made it easy, he said. Running like that. Her shoulders tightened, but she didn't lower her gaze. You violated sacred ground, an elder intoned. You endangered the balance. I was invited by the shrine, she answered. It answered me. A murmur rippled through the circle. Uneasy, disbelieving. The woman alpha stepped forward. We are not here to debate superstition. We are here to judge a threat.
She felt it then.
The shift. The way the air angled away from her. How eyes slid not to her face, but to her stomach. How whispers gathered weight. She's with child, someone said. That wasn't in the reports. The gray-haired alpha smiled thinly. Oh, but it was. We simply needed confirmation. Her heart slammed. You knew, she said quietly. He inclined his head. Of course. The elder raised a hand. Bring the mark. A younger wolf stepped forward, holding a relic she recognized instantly, a shard of obsidian etched with the same symbols carved into the shrine. The stone pulsed faintly as it neared her, heat licking against her skin. She took a step back. The alpha beside her moved at the same time, placing himself squarely between her and the relic. Enough. The elder's eyes narrowed. Step aside.
No.
This is council business. She is under my protection. The word protection sparked outrage. Voices rose. Accusations layered over one another. Danger, abomination, betrayal, extinction. Each word struck her like a blow, echoing memories she had never truly escaped. The gray-haired alpha lifted his voice, cutting through the noise. Let us be honest, he said. This is not just about her. Silence fell. It's about what she carries. Her breath hitched. She is not merely shadow flame, he continued. She is a vessel. The prophecies speak clearly. When shadow bears life, the world trembles. The child will either unmake us or remake us. Her vision narrowed. The elder turned toward her. Is this true? As she opened her mouth, closed it. She had sworn never to speak of the dreams. The blood moon. The crying that echoed across burning forests. The way her power had shifted the moment life took root inside her. Yes, she said. But you're twisting it. The woman alpha scoffed. There it is. You don't know what the prophecies mean, she said, voice shaking. You only know how to fear them. We know survival, the elder snapped. And we will not gamble it on your child. The word child cracked something inside her. They want to kill it, she whispered. The alpha beside her went utterly still. No, he said. You won't. The gray-haired alpha's gaze sharpened. You would defy the council for her? He didn't hesitate. Yes. Shock rippled outward. Wolves shifted, claws scraping against stone. The elders exchanged tense glances. The elder's voice hardened. Then you leave us no choice. The obsidian shard flared bright. Power surged through the clearing, ancient and hungry. The symbols on the stones ignited, casting harsh light across terrified faces. She is declared a threat to all packs, the elder proclaimed. Her child is deemed. No, she said. The word tore out of her, raw and furious. No more. The air around her thickened, shadows rising like a tide. Pain ripped through her spine as she reached inward, deeper than she ever had before. Heat followed, white-hot, searing. The alpha shouted her name. Too late. Shadow flame burst from her skin. Not wild, not consuming, but deliberate. It coiled around her arms, her shoulders, her belly, a living thing shaped by will and terror and love. The ground cracked beneath her feet. Torches guttered out. The circle recoiled. Wolves howled in fear. She stood at the center of it all, breath ragged, eyes blazing. She didn't unleash everything. She couldn't, not with the child so close to the surface of her power. But it was enough. Enough to show them what they had pushed into existence. I am not your prophecy, she said, voice echoing unnaturally. And my child is not your weapon. The elder staggered back. Contain her. The alpha beside her lunged, placing himself between her and the advancing wolves, his own power roaring to life. The air screamed with clashing dominance. She felt herself fraying. Too much. Too fast. The flame flickered. The gray-haired alpha seized the moment. You see, he shouted. She cannot control it. This is exactly why. Her scream cut him off. Not of rage. Of heartbreak. The flame collapsed inward, extinguishing itself in a rush of smoke and shadow. She dropped to her knees, hands braced against the stone, body shaking violently. The child cried out inside her. The sound broke something final and fragile. She looked up through tears, meeting the alpha's gaze. I trusted you, she whispered. He took a step toward her, horror etched into his face. I never meant. I know, she said. That's what hurts. She pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the dizziness, ignoring the pain. The shadows gathered around her like a cloak. This ends now, she said, voice hollow. You don't get to decide what I am. The council watched in stunned silence as she turned away, again, not running this time, but walking with quiet, terrible resolve. The forest parted for her. Behind her, the world she had tried to belong to shattered under the weight of its own fear. And far beneath the earth, something ancient opened its eyes, because the moment she chose herself over their judgment, the path to transformation was no longer avoidable. She did not run this time. The forest, once a place of hiding, now seemed to pulse with expectation. Every tree, every stone, every whisper of wind aligned itself as though it had waited centuries for this moment. She walked forward through the mist, barefoot, her dress torn and smeared with the residue of blood and shadow, but her gaze was unyielding. Her child stirred, not in fear, but in recognition. A spark, tiny but insistent, rippled through her spine, matching the rhythm of her heartbeat. The ground trembled before she saw him. The Lycan King arrived not with stealth, but with a storm. His presence folded the clearing into itself. He was enormous, regal in a way that burned the air around him. Golden eyes scanned the scene with predator's precision. His cloak of darkness moved like liquid, shifting with power that felt old. Older than forests, older than stone, older than the prophecy itself. Wolves bowed instinctively at the edge of the clearing. Packs he had never claimed before shivered in submission. You should not have come here, his voice rolled across the trees. Deep, commanding, layered with threat and curiosity. She raised her chin. The shadows around her surged, responding to her anger, her determination, her refusal to bow. I am not your sacrifice, she said, voice ringing like steel. The Lycan King's gaze flickered to the small curve of her belly. A predatory smile touched his lips, amused and dangerous. And yet, he said, everything you are screams otherwise. A tremor ran through the clearing. Not from him. From her. She felt it in the marrow of her bones. The shadow flame inside her, long restrained, long tested, long denied, began to stir. Pain lanced through her spine as the shadows coiled tighter, reaching for the flame that flickered dimly at her chest. She didn't fight it. For the first time, she let it pulse freely, let it answer her fear, her anger, her defiance. Her ancestors spoke. Not in words, but in visions that tore through her mind. The women and men of her bloodline, shadowed and regal, their eyes glowing with silver fire, reached through time. They whispered in memory and command. Claim it. Accept it. Be the storm they cannot contain. She gasped. Flame and shadow rippled across her skin, intertwining, spiraling upward, burning yet not consuming. The pain came in waves, hot and sharp, threatening to topple her to the earth, yet she stood. Each pulse of energy spoke of power she had denied herself, of strength she had been born to wield. The Lycan King moved closer. He did not strike. He tested. Probed. Like the world itself could bend to him. And now, to her. So, he said, voice low and lethal. This is what I was warned of. She did not answer with words. She answered with power. Shadows rose like black tide, flames licking through them, and the clearing ignited in a dance of light and darkness. Wolves howled in awe and fear. Branches bent, bark cracked, and the fog itself recoiled as though burned by unseen fire. Every instinct she had honed through exile and rejection guided her. She was no longer hiding. She was no longer unsure. Her child moved with her, a heartbeat of light within the shadowed storm, and she realized they were one now. Flame and shadow, mother and child, power and will. Nothing could sever the bond. The earth responded. Rocks trembled, ancient roots broke free from the soil, and the air cracked like distant thunder. The shrine she had fled, the seals placed long ago to contain her, quivered and shattered. Dust and light swirled in the clearing, blindingly bright and impossibly dark at once. The Lycan King's eyes widened. Even he, the ruler of dominion and fear, felt the pulse of something beyond control. You claim what is yours, he said, awe threading through his voice. You. I am not yours. I am mine, she roared, every word a blade of fire and shadow. He stepped back, just far enough to respect the force that radiated from her, and then another, until he finally stood at the edge of the tremor she had become. Wolves scattered. Trees groaned under the weight of magic not seen for centuries. The ground split in places, fissures swallowing stone, whispering at the power that now coursed openly through her veins. She lifted her hands. Flames danced across her fingertips, shadows clinging and twisting around them. She drew a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the weight of her ancestors, the heat of the child she protected, and the raw, unshakable will that had carried her from exile to this exact heartbeat. The Lycan King bowed slightly, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. Even he knew she had arrived at the apex of her own destiny. I am not afraid, she said softly. Not a whisper. Not a plea. Not a challenge. A truth. The fire expanded. The shadows thickened. They swirled around her like a cloak, coiling, twisting, alive with her intent. The tremors beneath their feet grew, shaking loose ancient bones buried deep in the earth, shaking loose every chain the world had tried to impose. And then, finally, she stepped forward. Every fiber of her being radiated authority, even as her body quivered with the effort of holding power this ancient. The Lycan King did not move to stop her. He simply watched. The other wolves, the alphas, the remnants of the council, they could only watch. She raised her voice, echoing across the forest, across the mountains, across time itself. I am not your sacrifice. I am not your weapon. I am the storm you cannot control. I am the shadow flame. I am the mother of what will come. And I will protect my child, no matter the cost. The ground split again. Light and shadow intertwined like a living serpent around her. Trees bent and cracked. The fog evaporated into smoke and sparks. Every pack within miles felt the pulse of her power, some trembling, some howling in recognition. Her shadows surged forward, mingling with the fire. The flames licked the earth, leaving scorched, smoldering patterns that reflected the shapes of her ancestors. The wind screamed, carrying her defiance to the edges of the known world. The Lycan King's cloak whipped in the turbulence. He moved, but only to stay aligned with her, a measured step behind, recognizing the apex of what had been awakened. He spoke, voice low but carrying through the chaos. You have done what none could. You are more than I feared. She did not lower her flames. She did not ease her shadows. She simply inhaled, a steadying breath, and let the world feel the fullness of what she had become. And for the first time in her life, she felt whole.
Flame. Shadow.
Mother. Warrior. Protector. The earth itself seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Ancient seals shattered, forgotten magic woke, and the forest, no longer a hiding place, bowed under her dominion. The Lycan King took one more step, his eyes now filled with a respect that bordered on reverence. He did not kneel. He did not speak. He simply acknowledged the power standing before him, a force untamed, unbroken, and undeniably hers. She exhaled. Flame dimmed slightly, shadows curling close but obedient. She could feel the energy settling into her, settling into the child. A bond forged in fire and darkness, in pain and defiance, in exile and triumph. She had claimed it, all of it. The forest trembled. The earth shifted. The skies above darkened and glimmered with the first hints of silver light, as if the ancestors themselves had risen to witness. And in that moment, nothing in the world could deny that she, a pregnant shadow wolf, cast out and hunted, had become a force beyond reckoning. She was not anyone's sacrifice. She was everything. And the Lycan King, once feared, once untouchable, stood witness to the birth of a power older than any pack, older than any prophecy. The world had tilted, and she was at its center. The fire had faded to embers. The shadows had curled back into obedience, settling like a heavy, protective cloak around her shoulders. Yet the tremor of her power remained in the air, an almost tangible pulse that made the leaves quiver, the fog dance, the distant mountains hum in silent recognition. She stood at the heart of the clearing, her chest rising and falling with a rhythm that mirrored the heartbeat of the world itself. The Lycan King remained at the edge, neither retreating nor advancing, his golden eyes watching every subtle motion. There was awe there, yes, but there was more than that. Hesitation. Uncertainty. He had faced many forces, conquered many packs, ruled over generations of fear. But she, this pregnant shadow wolf, made him pause. Made him question the balance of everything he thought he knew. Her own heartbeat was wild, ragged, a drum echoing inside her ribs as if the child within were speaking to her directly. Every instinct screamed survival, yet every spark of her soul trembled in awareness of what had just been unleashed. She had claimed her power, but at what cost? What worlds had shifted beneath her feet that she could never truly measure? She looked down at her hands, blackened with the residual smoke of shadow flame, yet shimmering with silver light beneath her skin. The contrast was mesmerizing. Beauty and danger, life and death, intertwined in ways that no pack, no council, no king could ever truly contain. And somewhere deep inside, she wondered if anyone ever could. The Lycan King stepped closer. His presence no longer carried the weight of challenge, but of recognition, acknowledgement of the magnitude that had erupted in that forest clearing. He spoke, low and almost reverent. "You've changed everything." She didn't answer. Words felt inadequate. They always did. Instead, she closed her eyes and let the pulse of her power settle into her bones, into the ground beneath her. The fire had faded to embers. The shadows had curled back into obedience, settling like a heavy, protective cloak around her shoulders. Yet the tremor of her power remained in the air, an almost tangible pulse that made the leaves quiver, the fog dance, the distant mountains hum in silent recognition. She stood at the heart of the clearing, her chest rising and falling with a rhythm that mirrored the heartbeat of the world itself. The Lycan King remained at the edge, neither retreating nor advancing, his golden eyes watching every subtle motion. There was awe there, yes, but there was more than that. Hesitation. Uncertainty. He had faced many forces, conquered many packs, ruled over generations of fear. But she, this pregnant shadow wolf, made him pause. Made him question the balance of everything he thought he knew. Her own heartbeat was wild, ragged, a drum echoing inside her ribs as if the child within were speaking to her directly. Every instinct screamed survival, yet every spark of her soul trembled in awareness of what had just been unleashed. She had claimed her power, but at what cost? What worlds had shifted beneath her feet that she could never truly measure? She looked down at her hands, blackened with the residual smoke of shadow flame, yet shimmering with silver light beneath her skin. The contrast was mesmerizing. Beauty and danger, life and death, intertwined in ways that no pack, no council, no king could ever truly contain. And somewhere deep inside, she wondered if anyone ever could. The Lycan King stepped closer. His presence no longer carried the weight of challenge, but of recognition, acknowledgement of the magnitude that had erupted in that forest clearing. He spoke, low and almost reverent. "You've changed everything." She didn't answer. Words felt inadequate. They always did. Instead, she closed her eyes and let the pulse of her power settle into her bones, into the ground beneath her, into the world that now quivered at the reality of her existence. She was no longer just the hunted. She was no longer the rejected Omega. She was the mother of a storm, a force neither prophecy nor pack had anticipated. And yet, even in triumph, fear lingered. Not for herself, for her child, for the delicate balance she now held between chaos and protection. Every ripple of air, every whisper of wind felt like a question. Would they accept her, or fear her? Would they rise with her, or crumble beneath the weight of what she had become? The clearing seemed to hold its breath. Even the fog, now thinning under the rising sun, waited. She felt it, a delicate, terrifying pause, the world at a tipping point. Would you fear her? The voice of the wind seemed to ask, carrying the echoes of every pack, every council, every shadow that had ever tried to bind her. Or would they fight beside her? Would they honor the power, the bloodline, the life she carried within her? Would anyone dare to walk into the fire and shadow and claim her side as their own? Her eyes opened, silver and black intertwined like molten steel and night sky. She did not blink. She did not waver. The question was not hers to answer, yet she felt its weight pressing against the edges of her mind, a challenge to every soul who had ever known her as weak or broken. She took a slow step forward, letting the shadows curl and flame ripple with each movement. It was a step of defiance, a step of ownership, a step declaring, in no uncertain terms, that her life, her child, her power, and her destiny belonged to no one. And the Lycan King? He did not step away. Not fully. Not yet. His golden gaze locked with hers, and in that silent exchange, 1,000 questions passed. Awe, fear, respect, desire, recognition of what they both now faced together and alone. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening. Even the distant mountains felt the vibration of her resolve. She was a presence impossible to ignore, and every creature, every being with sense enough to recognize threat or majesty, felt it. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension ease from her shoulders just enough to feel her body alive and whole. The flames of shadow flame curled around her like living fingers, retreating slightly but never vanishing. They whispered promises, power, protection, and the fierce, unyielding will of her ancestors. Her child moved again, small but insistent, and she pressed a hand to her belly. For the first time since the betrayal, since the exile, since the council's accusations, she allowed herself a spark of hope. They would not take this. Not her. Not the child. Not the fire that had awakened through pain and defiance. And yet, in the depths of her chest, a question lingered. What would the world do with this power? Who would rise to challenge it? Who would stand by her? Who would fall before it? The clearing seemed to echo back her unspoken fears, the very air vibrating with the lingering energy of shadow flame. It was a warning, a herald, a question suspended in eternity. Would they follow or flee? And then, softly, yet with undeniable authority, she spoke to the world that dared to listen. I am not anyone's sacrifice. I am not your weapon. I am not a prophecy to be feared. I am Mother. I am fire. I am shadow. And those who stand with me will rise, and those who do not will fall. Her words carried over the trembling forest, through the mist, across the mountains, and into the hearts of any pack or lone wolf who had ever doubted or shunned her. They carried weight, not just of power, but of conviction, of survival, of a life fiercely claimed. The Lycan King stepped closer, finally breaking the space between them, and bowed his head, not in submission, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement. He recognized the apex of her strength, the immensity of what she had become. He did not speak. He did not move further. He only watched, aware that the moment was hers alone. And as the sun broke fully over the horizon, scattering gold across the trembling forest, a voice, soft, yet impossibly clear, spoke to every listener, every soul drawn to the story unfolding in shadow and flame. If this story burned inside you, subscribe to Moonbound Werewolf Romance Stories. Because here we tell tales that refuse to be silenced. The forest seemed to sigh with release, or perhaps anticipation. Somewhere beyond the clearing, ancient magic stirred. Somewhere beyond the mountains, destiny leaned closer, watching, waiting. She did not know what would come next. She did not know what storms she would face, what battles she would wage, what hearts she would break or heal. But she knew one thing: she would face it all as herself, fully awake to the fire, fully awake to the shadows, fully awake to the truth of what she was. And that, she realized, was more terrifying and more beautiful than any prophecy the council had ever twisted. She was free. She was powerful. She was not afraid. The question remained, echoing softly like a heartbeat in the clearing. Would you fear her? Or would you fight beside her? The forest fell silent, or, at least, it seemed to. The wind no longer screamed, though it still whispered over the broken ground, stirring ash and fallen leaves like ghostly fingers. The sun had climbed higher, brushing the treetops with gold, yet shadows lingered. Not just the ones she carried, not just the ones that coiled around her flame, but deeper shadows, older shadows, shifting at the edges of the known world. She did not move from the clearing. She stood tall, body trembling with exhaustion, yet electrified by the sheer force of what she had claimed. Her shadow flames had settled into living darkness, curling softly against her skin, shimmering with the residue of power that would not be denied. Every breath she drew carried the weight of ancestors and prophecy, but also the fragility of life she had fought to protect. The child within her stirred again, small and insistent, and she placed a gentle hand over her belly. A soft murmur, almost a prayer, escaped her lips. The Lycan King remained at the edge of the clearing, a silent sentinel now rather than predator. He had stepped forward, closer than anyone dared, his golden eyes scanning the horizon, aware of dangers she could not yet see but could feel pulsing in the air. His presence was steady, a tether between chaos and control, between fear and resolve. And yet even he did not speak. He did not need to. This was her moment. But the world did not rest. Far beyond the clearing, beyond the broken seals and trembling trees, shadows began to stir. Not random, not aimless. They moved with intent, sinuous and calculating. Something ancient had noticed her claim, had felt the pulse of her shadow flame intertwined with the child she carried, and it began to awaken. A whisper threaded through the mist, so soft it could have been mistaken for the wind, yet it carried the unmistakable weight of authority, of knowledge, of danger. She is not the only one, the voice breathed, low and haunting, curling through the trees and across the mountains, brushing against every hidden pack and solitary wolf who knew the old ways. Her hand tightened over her belly. A chill ran down her spine. She had been preparing for threats she could see, wolves, councils, rival alphas. But this was different. It was a warning, a promise, a herald of trials she could not yet name. She looked to the horizon, the sunlight scattering over jagged peaks and shadowed valleys, feeling the weight of what had just been unleashed and the even greater forces that now stirred in response. The Lycan King stepped forward at last, placing a firm hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "Whatever comes next," he said, voice low but resolute. "We face it together. But you need to be ready." She did not speak immediately. Words felt small against the enormity of what she had sensed. Instead, she inhaled sharply, letting the scent of wet earth and smoke fill her lungs, letting the tremor of the forest and the pulse of her child synchronize with the beating of her own heart. Her eyes swept over the clearing, the broken torches, the cracked stones, the scattered remnants of council authority, and she knew, in a way that went beyond instinct, beyond fear, beyond prophecy, this was not the end. It was a beginning. From the edge of the mist, the first movement appeared, a shadow among shadows. It did not take form yet, but it pulsed with recognition, with curiosity, with threat. Something had felt the power she had claimed and moved toward it, guided by knowledge older than her ancestors. The forest seemed to tighten around her, the branches bending toward the clearing, leaves rustling in a warning that only she and the Lycan King could interpret. A low growl rolled from deep within her chest, a sound that vibrated through stone and soil, that echoed the power coursing in her veins. Her shadow flame flared once, small but deliberate, coiling around her arms and shoulders, signaling to the world. She was here, she was awake, and she would not be taken unprepared. The child within her responded, a pulse of life and fire, and she felt a sudden, sharp surge of clarity. The trials ahead would be nothing compared to what had already been endured. Every exile, every betrayal, every moment of doubt had led to this point. She had claimed her power. She had faced judgment. She had survived the councils, the shadows, the flames. And yet, even as the forest held its breath, she knew there were greater storms yet to come. The Lycan King's hand tightened on her shoulder. He had seen many battles, commanded many packs, faced many threats, but even he did not pretend to understand fully the force now anchored in her body, in the child she carried. And yet, unlike the others, he did not flinch. He simply stood beside her, a silent guardian and acknowledgement that some battles were not fought with claws or teeth, but with will, with heart, and with the undeniable truth of power claimed and destiny chosen. The wind shifted, carrying the voice again, distant now, teasing, a promise rather than a threat. She is not the only one. The words hung in the air, vibrating with the potential for confrontation, for alliance, for the awakening of forces that had lain dormant for centuries. She could feel them, not fully yet, only the brush of their presence, the tremor of their intent, the echo of a power that rivaled her own. And she knew instinctively, the story was far from over. Her body tensed, senses sharpening, shadows coiling around her like living armor. Every nerve fired with anticipation and caution. She had survived betrayal, rejection, exile, and judgment. But what was coming now would test everything, her strength, her resolve, her loyalty, and her heart. The Lycan King's eyes met hers. No words passed between them, yet the understanding was mutual. Together, they would face whatever stirred in the shadows. Together, they would rise or fall. And in that silent agreement, a bond was sealed, not of convenience, not of fate alone, but of shared defiance and recognition of power that could not be contained. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain just enough for clarity. Her gaze swept over the horizon, the forest trembling at her feet, the child stirring with quiet insistence. The sun had risen fully now, scattering light across the scars of the clearing, illuminating both beauty and destruction. She was at once warrior, mother, flame, and shadow, a living herald of everything that had come before and everything yet to come. And far beyond the clearing, far beyond the reach of even the Lycan King's vision, the shadows stirred more insistently. Shapes shifted, forms began to take tentative life, and the whisper returned, carrying across valleys and rivers, mountains and forests. She is not the only one. A chill ran across her skin, But it was no longer fear. It was anticipation. The story was continuing. The world had changed. And somewhere in the distance, forces long hidden and long forgotten were awakening, drawn by the same pulse that had awakened her. She glanced at the Lycan King once more. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of awe, caution, and respect. He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face, grounding her in the moment, even as the tremors of what was to come shook the edges of the forest. She let her hand rest over her belly again, feeling the child's heartbeat synchronize with her own, feeling the life and fire she had sworn to protect. And then she whispered, not to him, not to the world, but to herself. "We are ready." The wind stirred. The forest held its breath. The sun burned brighter, casting long shadows that twisted and flickered across the clearing. And from the darkness, from places unseen and ancient, the whisper came once more. She is not the only one. A promise, a warning, a challenge. And the shadow flame, now calm but alive beneath her skin, pulsed in response. The story was far from over.
The forest waited.
The world waited. And so did every listener drawn to the pulse of power, to the fire of defiance, to the shadow of a destiny claimed. Because this was not an ending. This was only the beginning.